Do you think Northern Cyprus welcomes you with a bouquet of flowers and keys to your dream home? Not quite. I've lived here for many years and I've seen dozens of clients buying a property here in Northern Cyprus. Some end up happily, but many do not. And nearly every problem starts with one of 5 avoidable mistakes. Stay with me until the end of this video, my friends, and I'm going to walk you through 5 common mistakes buyers make here in Northern Cyprus, and most importantly, how to avoid them. Welcome to my channel, my dear friends. My name is Maria, and the first mistake that I'm going to talk about is buying a property here in Northern Cyprus without checking the documents. Many buyers sign a contract in here without doing proper legal due diligence with the help of an independent lawyer. And it doesn't really matter whether you are buying an off-plan project directly from a developer or whether it's a resale with the help of an agent. An independent lawyer will always protect your interest. First of all, it's outstanding debts or any encumbrances from the bank or from the developer itself, because if any of those exist, the likelihood that you will receive a proper ownership papers is very slim. Second of all, military presence, because that's a very important factor as well. By law in TRNC, for a foreigner to be able to transfer the title deed into their name, a military object has to be not closer than 800 meters, and that's very important. Maybe the property has been sold to another buyer as well. It would be also great if you can request a land registry extract before making any payments, and of course, ensure the title deed structure. So the key points here you need to watch out for. First of all, hire an independent lawyer that's going to represent and protect your interest. And it doesn't cost much. It's only anywhere from £1,500 to £2,000 per contract. The lawyer takes you throughout the whole process until you get your title deed transfer into your name. Never rely solely on an agent or a developer. They never represent your legal interest. Mistake number 2, choosing property based on the price alone. Trust me, when there is a property that is too cheap, there's something wrong with it. And the things you need to watch out for, again, it's a shared title deed, it's a military presence, any sort of dispute, legal problems or court cases with outstanding debt on the property. Last but not least, of course, is the quality of construction. Northern Cyprus has a very high humidity, and if there's been no proper insulation done while the property was being constructed, later on it will arise in the form of mold and cracks on the wall. That's something you have to be aware of as well. Bottom line, cheap today might cost you a fortune tomorrow. Mistake number 3 is ignoring hidden costs. So let's say you found the property today with a great road potential, but have you encountered all the costs that are involved? Here in Northern Cyprus, hidden expenses include things like travel fee that can vary anywhere from £1,500 all the way to £5,000, depending on the type of the property that you are buying and depending on the developer as well as location. Fee for VRF system can cost you up to £5,000 as well, because a lot more developers nowadays including VRF system into construction as an upgraded type of technology. Of course, it's taxes. Today, in Northern Cyprus, a foreigner buying a property is expected to pay 9.5% tax, consisting of the registration tax, which is 6%, title deed transfer tax, which is 3%, and 0.5% tax, which is a stamp duty. On the top of that, my dear friends, you would be expected to pay 5% VAT to the developer directly based on the property price. If it's a resale, of course, VAT would most of the time have been paid already by the initial owner, but 9.5% tax is something that's non-avoidable, and every single new buyer of a property will have to pay those taxes. Water and electricity meter deposits, okay? Like, people don't even know that you have to put a deposit while getting connected to electricity, right? I mean, it doesn't cost much. It's only anywhere from €300 to €500, but still, it's an expense. One of the things buyers ignore completely is the cost of maintenance, okay? Maintenance fee is something that you pay to a developer or to any external company for the management of your complex. That includes cleaning of swimming pools so they stay clean, maintaining the gardens so they stay green, maintaining the security of the complex, right? Any sort of cleaning and maintenance that complex require with regards to the infrastructure that is located within. So those fees, they vary drastically. It can range anywhere from €50 per month on certain developments that have infrastructure, and it can go up to £250 per month depending on the project as well, right? And I mean, the bigger the infrastructure, the higher the fee, of course, but it doesn't always depend on the amount of infrastructure. Sometimes it just depends on the policy of the developer. So you have to encounter those costs when you're calculating your ROI, because those costs can be substantial. And what is the real return, you would ask me? Well, many agents, I'm going to promise you anywhere from 10 to 15% rental yield. But that's not the case, my dear friends, once you subtract all the extra expenses. You would be very lucky to get anywhere from 5 to 6% return on your rental yield. Tip of the day, don't solely rely on the agent claims of 10 to 15% per annum. Do your own due diligence. Go on the platforms like Booking.com. Check for the quotes of the similar type of font on the same location. And of course, while you're doing your own calculation, do not take more than 60% occupancy per year. And as well as that, you have to encounter for the management fee of your rental, because you're not going to be here to manage the rental, right? So the management fee, if it's an independent type of agency, they would normally charge you anywhere from 20 to 25% out of your total income. Whereas the developer company would most likely charge you closer to 40%. Another extra cost might arise when you're buying a resale that is still under construction or being completed, but the title deed is still on the developer's name. I mean, we're facing a bizarre situation right now here in Northern Cyprus where some developers change their assignment cost and now it exceeds 20,000 euros, okay? And that's on the top of your purchase price. So bear that in mind. If it's a resale property and the title deed is still on the developer, always encounter for that cost. Always ask an agent, what is the reassignment cost for this particular unit? So here you need to ensure that you encounter all hidden costs that you need to pay on the top of the purchase price along with the taxes. Please calculate your own ROI to compare with the information that you are given by the agents or the developers based on the real figures. And ensure that the developer has a good standing on the market of Northern Cyprus, long track record, all permits in place, and make sure you walk on the coastline to see what the natural surrounding is. Mistake number 4, my dear friends, is buying a property of a developer with no strong track record here in Northern Cyprus. You see, Northern Cyprus is full of bureaucracy, right? And a lot of the times, construction companies, while submitting and getting all the necessary documentation, face delays. Only a couple of years ago, developers used to start selling their projects while the documentation is still under process, okay? Meaning that people were buying the property, but there was no final permit for the construction just yet. And as well as that, developers were actually allowed to start a construction. I mean, by law, they were not allowed, but there was no obstacles. I mean, there was no punishment or penalties for starting the construction without having a final permit for it. So developers used to start a construction with no issues and, try to catch up on the time and deliver the projects on time. But even then, 90% of the projects in Northern Cyprus, of course, they most of the time face delays. Not significant ones, but half a year to a year time. But things have changed a year ago when the government has strengthened the rules when it comes to the construction. Now developers are not allowed to start the construction until there is a final permit in place. And because of that, a lot of projects are facing significant delays. A perfect example would be the fact that some of the developers started selling their projects a couple of years ago when there's no proper documentation in place. The documents are still in the process of getting final permit. Up to today's date, those companies have not received a final permit for construction, okay? Hence why they are not allowed to construct. But the delivery, let's say, is already in a year or 2 years to come. So those kind of projects, by no means I'm trying to say, the construction is not going to finish or you're going to lose the money. No, that's not the case. Those companies, they have a very good financial standing and they will definitely finish the projects, but are there going to be significant delays? Yes. And I'm talking about local companies that have a long track record in here in Northern Cyprus, that have a good financial ground, that have connections, that have a capacity to build, right? Even them, they're facing those bureaucratical delays with the papers, even though they're in a rush and have connections and know everybody around. So once it comes to the developers that are coming from overseas, what can they possibly do with no connections over here, right? So those companies, they came here just on the hype of the sales of the properties here in Northern Cyprus. We don't know their financial stability. They have no ties or links to Northern Cyprus as a country because they're coming from another country. So those developers you should be very careful about and access their ground, right? What kind of developments they built overseas, what their financial standings are, what their assets in here are, and if they have anything to lose in case they don't deliver the project. Don't solely rely on 3D images alone. Always go and check residences and projects that's been completed and fully functional by the same developer. Watch out for the quality of the construction, whether all the promises have been fulfilled. What is the management of the complex looks like? Is the complex clean? Is it well looked after? And so forth. And another factor you need to encounter for is the promises that developer is making, okay? A lot of the times it relates to the beachfront. A lot of Europeans, they love northern coastline of Northern Cyprus, right? Because of the mountain range, because the proximity to the sea, climate, etc. But northern coastline a lot of the times consist of rocks and pebbles, right? There are not too many sandy beaches that are natural. And of course, a lot of developers, they are promising that they will organize a sandy coast, they will bring the sand. Not everybody knows, but that sand, for it to stay in place for over a year or two, there's got to be a necessary infrastructure. And I'm talking about water breaks. Water breaks is a very hefty expense for a developer. It's a big investment, but only water breaks will ensure that the sand will remain in place. My dear friends, don't rely solely on the time of the delivery of the project. There is always a grace period that can vary anywhere from 4 months up to a year. And a lot of the times, majority of the times, developers use that grace period to finish the construction. And trust me, sometimes it goes beyond grace period. And due to the recent changes in the government legislation that's controlling the construction of the developer's company, there's going to be significant delays of a lot of projects. So watch out for that, please, my dear friends. It's a different case scenario if you are not overly concerned by the span of construction, if it's a long-term investment strategy for you. But in that case, my dear friends, make sure that you structure your payment plan with the developer according to the stages of construction, okay? That means that you will not find yourself in a situation where you've paid off your property and there's still another year or two for it to be constructed. Mistake number 5, location, and once more location. Here in Northern Cyprus, we face major challenges when it comes to the infrastructure in certain areas. As Northern Cyprus continues to grow rapidly, especially on the east side where Iskele is located and on the east of Northern Coastline where Ascentepe and Tatlisou are, Northern Cyprus has seen a major boom in the real estate development. But here's what most developers and agents are not telling you. The infrastructure is not keeping pace with all of those developments. Let me break it down for you, my dear friends. So the boom of the property market has started from the region called Iskele. Development after development after development after development grew in an empty land. But there was no proper infrastructure in place that was encountered for all of those constructions, okay? And I'm talking about electricity supply. And I'm talking about water supply, and of course, the infrastructure for canalization system. So in places like Iskele, daily power cuts and water cuts are becoming norm for few hours a day. And of course, municipalities along with the authorities are trying to take some actions and change the infrastructure to adopt it to a lot bigger community. But again, until that is done in a proper way, people have to live with the uncomfortable conditions of daily power cuts. Whereas for Iskele, it's a major problem already because a lot of the developments have been delivered. If we're talking about regions like Ascentepe and Tatlisou, the issue of power cuts and water cuts is not as huge as of now because a lot of developments are still under construction. But the biggest problem will come to the day when majority of the projects will start their key handover. And that will happen, starting with 2026 all the way to 2029, right? When roughly 30,000 of apartments are going to be delivered within a span of 2 years. And that's a major amount for that particular region because that region has always been rural. There's never been too many complexes. It's a village type of style. Not too many people lived in there and there was no adequate infrastructure. And if actions are not being taken right now by municipalities and authorities, the problem can become very big in the years to come. You will also need to encounter for the infrastructure such as schools, hospitals, supermarkets, shops, restaurants, etc. And if we go back to Iskele in that sense has been developing very rapidly over the past year. We've seen clinics being opened. We've seen a private school being opened last year, right? Doga school and Nearist school. We've seen a lot of shops are being opened this year, right? It's a new places, new restaurants, new venues. So Iskele doesn't struggle with the infrastructure. It has everything that you might need for your day-to-day life, including the educational for the kids. And as well as that, of course, Famagusta is nearby. It's only 15 minutes drive away from the heart of Iskele. While Iskele is already booming with the city infrastructure, Esentepe and Tatlisu has a long way to go. Yes, in the last year alone, we've seen a couple of brand new shops being opened, couple of new venues and restaurants, and as well as that, there is a clinic that's been opened just at the end of last year. But still, there is no municipalities, there is no banks. But things like school and kindergartens or universities, of course, Esentepe doesn't have them. Public transportation is also not accessible in the Esentepe and Tatlisu regions. And even though the place might look beautiful with the sceneries, with the mountain range, and possibly with attractive pricing point, still, retirees and young families might find themselves in a challenging position if they choose that region as a permanent place for living. My advice to you, my dear friends, if you are considering buying a project, go around, look what the infrastructure is accessible to you. Whether there is any grocery shops nearby that you can walk to. Can you walk to the beach that has a sandy coast and is convenient to swim? Are there any clinics nearby? And most importantly, if you have children, is there any school or kindergarten to attend? If you found this video helpful, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more information. Also, my dear friends, if you think there is something else that I've missed and you would like to add, please write in a comment below and we will continue the discussion. Thank you so much for watching, my dear friends. See you in the next video.